Who was crying outside that man's bedroom door? What threw that remote control in this young mother's living room? What did he see moving around in that asylum? How did those fingerprints get on the inside of her window? What was banging on the inside of her closet? Today, we have 5 spine-chilling true ghost stories, and in the 4th story, we have actual footage. Please like and subscribe for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul. So, I just moved into a new home a few months back. One night, I was sitting on the couch in the living room, watching TV at about 11:30 PM. I'd just gotten home from work, so I was absolutely drained. I was kind of just sitting there, staring into space. For context, my living room sits on the far right side of the house. In the middle is my kitchen, and on the left-hand side is my bedroom. I was just drifting off with the TV on, when suddenly I could hear what sounded like somebody aggressively going through my belongings in my bedroom. Initially presuming there was an intruder, I looked over into my bedroom and could quite clearly see that there was nobody there. My hairs started standing on end, and I totally froze up. I stared back at the TV because something in my head was telling me, do not look over there. Before I even had a chance to contemplate what was going on, the situation went from scary to downright terrifying. Out of nowhere, I could hear footsteps stomping at me at full speed, from my room straight across the kitchen. It stopped right in front of me as I was sitting on the couch. It was so loud, I literally flinched and shielded myself, out of sheer instinct because I really thought something was about to strike me. As the footsteps reached me, the room filled with an absolutely putrid smell that I can't even begin to describe. Every hair was standing on end, and my stomach dropped. I felt physically sick. However, this wasn't the only experience I had in that house. Every evening, before I went to bed, I would deadbolt the front door. However, on the odd occasion I'd wake up in the morning, and the front door would not only be unlocked, it would be wide open. My back door is situated in the kitchen. Plenty of times, when I've been sitting in my kitchen eating breakfast, I've heard and seen the handle to the kitchen door moving up and down. I don't just mean shaking a little bit, I mean violently moving up and down. It was as if somebody was trying to get out, or indeed in, to my property. I've been in my bedroom with the door closed, and heard what sounded like somebody crying on the outside of my door. I could hear words amongst the crying, but it was fairly inaudible, so I couldn't really understand it. I was just begging for it to stop. The last thing I'll mention is when I was standing at the top of my stairs, ready to walk down, when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs towards me. It sounded like they were dragging their body across the wall as they walked up the stairs. I really think it's time for me to start looking for somewhere else to live. Have you ever experienced anything like this? So, last night my husband had to go to hospital with our youngest. He's okay, but they didn't get home until around 4 AM. Meaning, I was alone with our other 3 kids. So, it all started when I went to the thermostat to turn the heating off for the night. It was around 9 PM. Just as I turned the dial, I heard "Mum" from over my shoulder. Initially presuming it was one of my kids awake and out of bed, I promptly turned around and said, "What's up?" My heart dropped, as I immediately realised there was nobody there. Our cat was staring straight into the bathroom at something. But after what had just happened, I didn't dare investigate. I tried to brush it off and told myself I must have just been imagining things. I turned on the AC and went to check on the kids. They were sound asleep, snoring and drooling, all of them. Then I went to my bedroom, which was right at the back of the house. All the cats went to lie on my bed. I crawled into bed and started scrolling through my phone when I heard what sounded like something being thrown in my living room. I jumped up immediately and could clearly hear what sounded like something being dragged along the floor. This was followed up by bare footsteps smacking quickly across my living room floor. Now I was sure one of my kids had gotten up and were messing around. I rushed into the living room and shouted,
"What are you doing?"
And all I could see was the remote across the other side of the otherwise very neat living room. It was on the floor, and the batteries were on the floor not far away from it. There was nobody in my living room, especially not my children. At this point, I was absolutely terrified, thinking somebody was in my house. So I decided to do a sweep, as my dad calls it. I walked around the house, clicking on every light. I opened every door and closet. Everything was now on. My kids started to stir, but they were still asleep, so I decided to shut their doors and turn their lights off. I determined now that everything was clear. I could find nobody anywhere. Totally confused, but still thinking about potential intruders, I went to the bathroom in my bedroom at the back of the house and texted my family. I explained to them what had happened and said maybe I was losing my mind. My heart rate started to calm back down again, and I was checking my phone for updates from my husband. Suddenly, in the doorway to the bathroom, with the door open, I could hear my daughter's tiny voice say,
"Mummy?"
I've never known such terror in all my life. My stomach dropped. My blood felt like ice. Just this horrible feeling of dread washed over me as I looked up from my phone, hoping to see my daughter, but deep down knowing there was nobody there. In a panic, I decided to call my dad. He called the police and immediately drove over to my place. The police arrived pretty quickly, but found nothing of any concern. My dad also found nothing, but stayed with me until my husband arrived home. Do I sage the house? Do I call a priest? Or do I just try my best to ignore it? I have seen shadows moving out of the corner of my eye since we started renting this place. What would you recommend? Story 3. What I saw still haunts me. When I was 17 years old, the cool thing to do at the time was to visit the Embryville Asylum in Chester County to explore. This asylum has been abandoned since the 1980s. At one point, it was a mental institution. Then, it was an elementary school. Then, it was a hospital. And finally, it was a home for the mentally unwell. The asylum consists of 10 to 12 buildings, each roughly the size of an elementary school, all of them dilapidated. There is an unmarked cemetery across the street, with numbers on each of the graves, but no names. I went with a group of about 8 people at roughly 10 p.m. We started by going into several of the closer buildings, which were creepy, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then, we proceeded to what was known as the main asylum, which was by far the biggest and oldest building. This one really gave me the creeps. As you might imagine, there were gurneys in the hallways. Things were just scattered everywhere, and the whole place just had a really cold vibe. We started moving through the building and made our way to a stairwell. I took the lead position and started moving forwards. My buddy and I made our way to the 4th floor, and we soon realised that the others hadn't followed us. We went on ahead anyway. We approached a hallway intersection where to the left and right of us were large day room type areas. These areas had hallways that led to open rooms, which widened as you entered. Before I turned the corner, my buddy said to me, "Did you just say something?" To which I responded that I hadn't. He told me he swore he heard someone say something. At this point, I turned the corner and pointed my flashlight towards the day room. In clear view, I saw something cross from left to right within the threshold of that door. It had the figure of a person, but with my light directly on it, I could see that it had no pigment. It was like the absolute absence of colour or light, blacker than the night outside. It had dimensions to it, and it was human-shaped, but it didn't seem to have any legs. I grabbed my friend, and we turned tail and ran as fast as we possibly could. I never went back to that place at night. I left there feeling cold and terrified, and it's stuck with me since that day. I still think about it a lot. What do you think I saw? I recently moved into a new apartment. The landlord had informed me that the previous tenants moved out under mysterious circumstances. They left in a hurry, but never really offered an explanation. I wasn't too sure what to make of that. Regardless, I was super happy to finally get a place close to work. After being here for about a month though, strange things started to happen. I started waking up in the middle of the night to what sounded like somebody clearing their throat right next to my ear. Naturally, I'd open my eyes, scan the room, and see nobody there. Then, in the mornings, before hopping in the shower, I'd notice scratch marks across my neck. I figured I'd probably inflicted them myself in my sleep without realising, and just disregarded them. However, some things have happened this week that make me reconsider that. As an avid book collector, I have a little bit of everything, including some children's literature. I keep all the picture books on the bottom shelf. This way, my nieces and nephews have easy access to them when they come to visit. Well, this morning, when I went into the kitchen to make breakfast, I noticed a picture book lying on the counter with a box of cereal next to it. This immediately gave me the chills. I live alone, and I certainly didn't put them there, and my family hasn't visited me at my new place yet. Nonetheless, I went about my day, ran some errands, and returned home later that day. As I approached my front door though, something caught my attention. I could see mist on my window, the kind of mist that you get when hot breath touches a cold surface. Pressed into that mist was a set of tiny fingerprints like those of a child. I tried rubbing them away, but they wouldn't smear, which meant that they were on the inside. Upon realising this, a chill ran down my spine. No children had been in my house. Unlocking the door, I quickly ventured inside, scanning the room and flipping on the light switch as soon as I walked in. There was nobody there, and nothing looked disturbed. So, I tried to forget about it. I cooked myself some dinner and went to bed early. About an hour ago, however, I was woken by the sound of laughter and the creaking of a swing. As I glanced out of my window, what I saw shocked me to my core. There was an empty swing, rocking backwards and forwards on its own. The following video is the footage that I captured. I went to bed like normal, and at around 2 AM, I was woken up by the usual sound of clothes swinging in my closet. I was facing away from the doors when they opened, and this time I heard someone step out of the closet and stand behind me. I could feel their presence as I lay there frozen in fear. Eventually, I worked up the courage to jump out of bed and sprint into the living room. I slept on the couch that night. From this moment, I would occasionally hear footsteps casually walking around on the carpet in my bedroom. One night, the curtains across the sliding glass doors billowed out as if somebody was standing behind them. It started at the back corner and moved all the way across until finally it just faded away. Then, a calendar that was pinned up on the closet started swinging back and forth. It was like a breeze was slowly making its way around the room. I had a Mardi Gras mask made of peacock feathers sitting on a shelf where I store my necklaces. This breeze made the peacock feathers wave and the necklaces swing back and forth. Then, the tassel-style switch on my floor lamp started to swing backwards and forwards too. The sense of fear grew more and more intense as I could feel this thing slowly creeping its way around the room towards me. It seemed to stop dead in front of me for a moment. I couldn't see it, but I could most certainly feel it. It was like an intense feeling of pressure unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. Then, the closet door opened and closed, and the pressure dropped. The ominous feeling drifted away, and everything just seemed to go back to normal. One day, at around 3:45 PM, I was picking my son up from school. He and I were standing in the kitchen while I was making him a mac and cheese. It was a galley kitchen, with a generous gap between the cabinets and counter that faced the dining room, which stood in between the living room and family room. The kitchen was in the middle of the house, with a hallway behind it that led to my sister's and my son's room, and then turned left to go to the master. You could circle the kitchen by coming in the front door, going slightly left past their bedrooms, and a storage room on the right that butted up to the kitchen. Then you reached the tea section, where the master room was off to the left, and the kitchen and family rooms were off to the right, as well as the dining room and then the living room. When you came in through the front door, you entered into the living room and could walk straight through into the dining room. The dining room was lined with sliding glass doors. The stove was on the wall opposite the dining room, and my son was standing there, facing slightly towards me. His back was to the entrance of the kitchen, and I was facing slightly towards him, and towards the entrance. Suddenly, something very big moved the entire length of the dining room. He saw it first, as he was already facing that way. Then, it came round the corner, past the kitchen entrance, which he couldn't see, because he had his back to it. It moved incredibly fast, but made no sound at all. At exactly the same time, we both immediately said, "Did you see that?" What the hell was it? I ran to the kitchen entrance and didn't see anything, then went straight up the hall to the master bedroom. I looked the other way as I passed the tea, just to check that hallway. I made it to my room just in time to see the closet door as it was closing. We both saw it, but because I was facing the door, for the first time ever, I saw him, the apparition of a full-grown man. He was wearing dark clothing. I think the shirt was a kind of maroon and his pants were black. But it was so quick, it was hard to know for sure. The man was definitely Caucasian, but I couldn't really make out any distinguishing features. He moved at a very fast pace, perfectly upright, no movement of his body at all. It was like he was hovering and there was absolutely no sound. That was the only time I ever saw him fully manifest. Me and my son both remember that experience like it was yesterday. One day, things changed. I was kinda getting used to living with paranormal activity. It didn't really scare me anymore, per se, but every now and then it would startle the hell out of me, when it would shove my bed really hard, or knock really loud on that closet door. But I was mostly used to it. Then, one day, it all felt very different, like negative or oppressive or something. My sister had moved out, and my friend from work moved in. I still worked first, and he worked the second shift. I was sitting on the couch when I started hearing scratching sounds. They sounded like they were coming from behind the seat that was against the wall, perpendicular to where I was. My initial thought was that it was some kind of insect or rodent, because that's exactly what it sounded like. I got up to investigate, and as I got closer, it just stopped. To me, that just confirmed that it was a mouse or something inside the wall. So I just figured I'd let the landlord know in the morning. A little while later, I went to my room and shut the door behind me. Then I went into the bathroom. I turned on the extractor fan to have a smoke in the bathroom. I sat on the floor in front of the sink, just smoking my cigarette, kind of daydreaming to myself. Then that scratching sound started coming from a basket that I had full of hair ties and combs sitting just behind the toilet. It totally freaked me out, but it stopped pretty quickly. I examined the basket and found nothing out of the ordinary, and nothing else happened. The next day, I was in the dining room at work feeding one of the residents, when all of a sudden that scratching sound started coming from the tray that was right in front of us. We both heard it, and she was incredibly unnerved and wanted to go back to her room. It was totally bizarre. At the end of my shift, I collected my things and went home. I walked straight through the living room and dining room down the hallway to my bedroom. As soon as I turned around the corner and looked up the hallway towards my room, I knew straight away something wasn't right. I'm totally OCD about making my bed in the morning, and my bedroom was a disaster. It was like somebody had been having a pillow fight in there. All the covers and pillows were a total mess. As I got closer, I noticed that there was something on the wall behind the bed. I went to look, and there was something kind of rusty-coloured splattered on the wall right by the headboard. This absolutely wasn't there when I left for work, and nobody had been in the house all day. It looked just like dried blood. I even called my parents to come and have a look, and they agreed it definitely looked like blood. I never found any source for the splatters. Eventually, for some reason that I'll never know, it all just stopped. That feeling was now completely gone, and the closet didn't open anymore. I have absolutely no idea why we were being haunted, or why it all stopped. All I know is that we're all a lot happier in that house now, and I pray to God that this thing never returns. That wraps things up for today. I hope those stories really gave you the chills. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for a feast of grim and grisly content, and leave your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.